Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. How was lunch? Good, good. For those of you who I've not had the opportunity or privilege to meet, I'm Maureen Sintich, Executive Vice President and System Chief Nursing Officer for Inova Health System, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you this afternoon. I know that you've had a wonderful morning, and I'm very much looking forward to having a wonderful afternoon with all of you as well. So what I'd like to do is to start with our first speaker, and I'd like to introduce Brian Miller. You know, in our increasingly distracted world, we are becoming more disconnected than ever before, and it's taking a toll on our personal and professional relationships. Brian Miller is a corporate keynote speaker, youth motivational speaker, and magician. His TED Talk, How to Magically Connect with Anyone, has inspired nearly 3 million people worldwide to make a better connection with people in their lives. It's the most popular TED Talk ever given by a magician. Brian graduated college with degrees in mathematics and philosophy before turning down a PhD offer in order to pursue his dream of being a professional magician. He has since shared his magic and his message with thousands of audiences in over 30 states and on 4 continents. Brian first built his reputation as a college campus entertainer, earning 2 nominations for America's Best Campus Artist by Campus Activities magazine. From there, he began accepting invitations to entertain at corporate functions and exclusive private events. A passionate guitarist and singer, Brian spends his rare free time writing and recording original rock and pop music. He lives in Connecticut with his wife, Lindsay. Please join me in welcoming Brian Miller to the podium.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. Well, hello, everybody out like this, if you can, out like this. Everybody out, oh, that was very good. We're going to wake back up from lunch. That's good. You don't actually have to wiggle your fingers, but I appreciate that you're all doing it. Keep your hands out. Keep your hands out like this. Ready? Left hand, thumb down, palm out. Right hand, thumb down, palm out. Take one arm, cross it all the way over the other. Lock your fingers together. Keep your thumbs down. Make sure your neighbors got their thumbs down. Make sure you got your thumbs down. At the back, we got their thumbs down. Okay, everybody on me. Ready? Wiggle your thumbs. Wiggle your shoulders. And go like this. Magic! Yay! You shouldn't start like that. People ignore you for the entire time. You'll just see people wandering the Inova parking lots later like this. You'll know where they came from. So you didn't hear that wrong. It's not a typo. I am a professional magician. Some of you are like, why is there a magician at our conference? The rest of you are like, all right, we got a magician at our conference. Very, very cool. The best part about my job as a magician is that I get to travel constantly. And as I travel, there's a number that I keep in my mind. The number is 80,000. 80,000. That's how many people you will meet and personally interact with over the course of a lifetime. 80,000 people. Which means at this point in your life, each and every one of us in this room has already met at least 20,000 people. And the question I want you to roll around the back of your mind over the rest of today is, how many of those 20,000 stories do you know? The way the math works out, we meet an average of 3 new people every single day. 3 new people every day of your life on average. Will you use those 3 opportunities today to make your life and the lives of the people you meet better? That's the question of leadership, and that is your task as healthcare professionals concerned with patient experience. Now, you and I both meet higher than the average amount of people because of the nature of our jobs. I do this. I meet people all over the world, people that look just like you, and I meet people nothing like you all over the world. I meet people with different belief systems, backgrounds, cultures, religions, languages, ideologies, and so each and every day I am reminded that our world is a shared experience, but it's fractured by individual perspectives. You have a perspective that's different from yours, that's different from mine. Now imagine if we could all understand each other. Wouldn't that be a better world? And that's what we're going to chat about in our brief time together today, how to make better and more meaningful connections with the people in your life, personally and professionally. But in my experience, that is as long as I'm allowed to talk after being introduced as a magician before I'm required to do a trick. I can feel people like, that's very nice. find my card, pull a rabbit out of your hat, something, anything. So I'm going to get started with one of the oldest illusions in magic, something to let you think about while I'm up here today. This right here, that's not it. That's just a piece of rope. Do me a favor, would you check that out? Make sure that's what it seems to be. I've got one over here, somebody right here. Oh, you're taking notes. That's very nice. Here, take that out. Make sure that's what it seems to be. And one for you. Check that out. Make sure that's what it seems to be. Is it what it seems to be? Are you what you seem to be? I don't know what that means either. You're like very confused. You should see, I say that at philosophy conferences. They're like, I have no idea. Am I who I seem to be? I seem to be who I think I am. Here, toss that back. That's one. Woo! Magicians. That's a 1, 2. Woo! Look at that. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. 3 pieces of rope, and they're all the same length. Yes. One person at the back. It's gonna be a great show. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. Look, if I take the ends and I hold them up, now they look like they're the same length. The ends do. I didn't say it was a great illusion. I just said it was an old illusion. All right, I'll prove it to you. Here we go. Thousands of years old, still looks good. Yeah. That's the big one right there from the beginning. That's the medium one right there. That's the small one right there. Now, there's too many things going on, right? Three ropes, 2 hands, 10 fingers. So I'm going to get rid of one of the pieces of rope. It'll be easier to follow with only 2, won't it? Maybe I should just start over with only 1 and be a little bit simpler with only 1. Sometimes the ends come off, which is a little unusual, I'll give you that. But I'll do that again in case you missed it there at the back. If I take the ends off the wrong side, I have to come back up here and put them back on the right side. Then there's people who think that this trick is all about the ends. That's not true. The middles come off too. I can place the middles right here back on the rope. We're back in business, but you know that this trick wasn't done with 1 piece of rope. It wasn't even done with 2 pieces. It was actually done with... 2 of us watched Sesame Street. That was great. That was that's the big one right there from the beginning. That's the medium one right there. That's a small one right there. Can you tell which one's which from the beginning? Can you tell? You see, this is the big one. That's the big one. That's the medium one. That's the small one. Little illusion for you to think about. You're all very kind. So I want you to keep that in mind. When I started my career, I was doing a lot of performing in restaurants, going table to table, doing card tricks, coin tricks, sleight of hand. For those of us who met during lunch, very similar to those types of things. And I remember vividly this one night I was on fire. I was a young magician, and I was fast and funny. My moves were perfect. I was unstoppable that night, just having one of those nights. And I swaggered up to this table, an elderly man and his wife, and I said, "Folks, would you like to see some magic while you wait for your meals?" And the man looked at me and he said, "Sir, I would love to see some magic, but I can't." And then he said, "Unfortunately, I'm blind." So I looked at him, really looked at him for the very first time, and it was so clear he was blind. His eyes were glazed. He wasn't really looking at anything. Anybody in this room would have known he was blind, but I wasn't looking at him. I was so wrapped up in my evening, so lost in my perfect night as a magician, I just saw 2 generic people and I launched into my show. So I stood there embarrassed, and that word was just ringing in my ears, blind, blind, blind. And I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize I don't have anything I can do for you right now." But then in an attempt to save the situation and make myself feel better, I said, "But if you ever come visit me again, I promise I'll have some sort of magic I can share with you." He said, "I'll hold you to that." And I went on with my night. A few weeks later, they came back. I recognized them immediately and panicked. I had completely forgotten about them. I raced back to the room where I kept my stuff, and I just stood there racking my brain, thinking every trick I'd ever learned, every book I'd ever read, something, anything I can do for this man. And then I had an idea. I didn't know where it came from. It was obscure, but it's all I had, so I kind of composed myself. I walked back out. I said, "Folks, my name is Brian. I'm the magician." He cut me off. He goes, "All right, we're back. What do you got for me?" With a big old smile on his face. I asked his wife, "May I sit next to you?" She said, "Sure." So I sat next to her. And I said, "Ed," his name was Ed. I asked, magician, not a psychic. I said, "Ed, do you trust your wife?" He said, "Sometimes." I said, "Will you trust her now?" He said, "Sure." So I took out a pack of playing cards. I gave them to her. I said, "Please mix up the cards. Make sure there's nothing special, no abrasions, nothing." She said, "No, they're fine. They're normal." I took Ed's hand. I placed a card in his hand. I said, Ed, do you think this is a red card or a black card? He said, red. And he was right. I placed the next one in, and he said, red. He was right again. And I placed the next one in, and he said, black. Again, correct. His wife starts getting skeptical. We just kept going. Red, red, black, red. We're going faster. Black, red, black, black. He's getting all of them right. Red, black, red, 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 all the way through the deck. At the end of it, Ed's laughing. He's howling. The entire restaurant was staring at us, and I turned, and his wife was weeping tears of joy. It was the most beautiful magic I had ever experienced. And a little bit later, I'm going to tell you how he did it. But the real secret of the trick, the real secret of magic, is taking on and understanding different perspectives, different points of view. So think back to the rope trick. What happened there? I know you're all like, yeah, that's what we've been thinking about. What happened there? Well, what really happened there? It seems like you and I had a very different experience, doesn't it? I mean, think about what happened. What did I see? I saw the moves. I saw the juggling. I saw the sleight of hand. I saw the secret, right? What did you see? You saw the ends of a rope jumping on and off 3 different ropes, changing length impossibly, violating the laws of physics. But that's just what we saw. What did we feel? You may have felt amusement, hopefully wonder, maybe frustration, possibly anger. I felt focus. These are not two different experiences. These are 2 different perspectives on the same experience. See, magicians have a unique dilemma. A magician is the only person who cannot see the magic. Why? Because I know how the trick works. And that knowledge of the secret is a limiting perspective. So a magician must completely, in order to create wonder, we must completely take on the point of view of the audience. We do it night after night, no matter who's out there, no matter what your background is or where I am in the world, and it always works. Because magicians have learned a technique called perspective taking. Perspective taking is the ability to see the world from the point of view of another person. That's it. It sounds simple in theory, but in practice it can be incredibly difficult to do. For example, ever played around with one of these before? Rubik's Cube. Some of you look excited. Most of you look angry just because I'm holding one. I can feel it. I can feel it a little bit. They're actually easier to solve than they look. Take the stickers off, rearrange them, put them back in the right order, yeah? Break the pieces apart, put it back together. I learned how to do one of these by memory as a kid. And then I realized if you spin it really fast, so what just happened there? Well, I know from years, from over a decade of doing the Rubik's Cube trick in front of live audiences, that if I take out a Rubik's Cube, mix it up, and without saying a word, toss in the air and it comes down solved, the audience is going to think that I am a jerk. Or at the very least, a show-off. And I don't want you to feel like that. I want you to enjoy the experience of magic. So what do? I make a few simple jokes, cheesy jokes. I say, take the stickers off, break the pieces apart, put it back together. When I do that, you go, oh, I did that. My friends said, we did that. We smashed it with a hammer. We threw it at a wall. And when you do that, you feel like I understand you. And when you feel understood, we make a connection. And then I can do the trick. And we can all enjoy the magic in that shared space. Does that make sense? So now you know what perspective taking is, of course, many of you knew already, the ability to see the world from the point of view of another person. And you know why magicians do it, to create wonder and connect with the audience. But why should you care? You're not magicians. Well, it turns out that this technique, perspective taking, it drastically improved my life off stage, outside of magic, in ways I could have never imagined. I've never struggled to get into relationships or meet new people, make friends. But I always struggled to maintain them when I was younger. I would meet some new friends, get into a cool relationship, and then eventually everything was going good. And then just suddenly communication would break down, people would leave, and I would be alone. And this pattern continued until I finally recognized that it was my fault, which is the hardest thing you ever admit to yourself. The people in my life didn't feel like I cared about them. That wasn't true, but it doesn't matter. It's not enough to care about somebody. It's not enough to understand them. They have to feel understood. They have to feel cared about. And I wasn't doing that. And then I realized I could take this technique I had honed on stage, the ability to see the world from the point of view of another person. I could apply it to my life off stage, outside of magic. And when I did that, I started making better and more meaningful connections with the people in my life. I met friends, incredible friends that have and will last a lifetime. I met a beautiful, fiercely intelligent woman, the love of my life, and I held on to that relationship. We're coming up next week on our 2-year wedding anniversary. Thank you. I'll pass it along to her. That would have never been possible before. So the question is, well, sounds good. I'd like to do that. How do you do that? Because the problem with so many motivational speakers that I see and I saw when I was younger is that they get you really riled up, they get you excited, and then you walk out like, yeah, I have no idea what to do with anything I just heard. You just don't know what to do with. This conference is very, 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 very different from that. Everybody's had great things to say, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to use perspective taking. So first, there's 2 different types of perspectives. There's visual perspective and emotional perspective. Magicians primarily deal with visual perspective. We need to literally know what the trick looks like from the point of view of the audience. So we practice in front of mirrors, we film ourselves and watch it back. But human relationships are primarily about emotional perspective. The question is, how does somebody feel about our interaction, right? Seems like a hard thing to do. Seems like mind reading. But we can do it. In fact, we all try. We're just mostly bad at it. But we can do it. It's a skill you can learn and hone and practice and get better at. So let's get back to Ed and his wife. The relevant question for Ed was, what would magic feel like to someone who is blind? That's a hard question to answer if you're not blind. I didn't want Ed to feel tricked. I knew that right away. I didn't want him to feel tricked. I'm not blind, so I don't know, but I have to imagine that if you're blind, you might worry that you could be tricked by anybody at any time. I didn't want him to associate that feeling with magic. I wanted Ed to feel magic. I wanted him to be magical. And I wanted his wife, this woman who spends her life looking out for him, I wanted her to see him in that light and for them to share in that experience together. So, if you want to get into somebody's emotional perspective, very different from you, it sounds difficult, but it's not. You know how you do it? You just ask. You ask questions. Too often we are afraid to ask people questions because we think it'll be rude or somehow they won't want to answer. But we underestimate people's willingness to answer our questions. Before the trick, I asked Ed, have you always been blind? He said yes. See, that was crucial, relevant information for me because the perspective of somebody who has never been able to see will be different, drastically different from somebody who had their sight and then lost it to accident or to illness. With Ed, I can't even use the language of sight. He might not know what I was talking about. He might, but he might not know what I was talking about. So by asking meaningful and relevant questions, I can adjust my tone, my demeanor, even my language to help him feel understood and bridge that gap. Very powerful as a performer, very powerful in the healthcare field. But more important than simply asking questions is listening, right? And the key, and you all know it, you could even chorus it with me, is listening to understand, not just to respond or to reply. This has become such cliched advice it is actually a Facebook meme. But sometimes we need to hear the cliches over and over and over again. Listening, how often do we listen to people? We're only listening to them so that we can come up with something clever to say. So the second their lips stop moving, we can just jump in and say our thing, right? You're like, all right, they're still going, and their lips are done. My thing, listen to me, right? Have you ever asked for somebody's name and instantly forgotten what it was? You know why you forget people's names? Because while they're telling you their name, we're thinking about how we're going to say ours. Mr. Miller, first name, last name, put up my hand. We're not listening. We're on our end of the conversation too often. We have to get out of it. We have to get onto their end of the conversation to bridge that gap and form those connections. So I invented a technique for myself a few years ago that I use in every conversation I have, whether it's on stage as a performer, or whether it's out there in my personal life. And it's an acronym. Speakers, we love our acronyms. It's an acronym for active listening, and it spells out EARS, E-A-R-S, EARS. I'm going to go through them one at a time for you. E, eye contact. Now, this is, of course, specific to Western culture. If you travel the world, you find out that most Eastern cultures reverse this, so be aware of that. But in Western culture, particularly here in the States, the listener makes eye contact with the speaker. This sounds trivial, like, well, yeah. But think about when you're talking to somebody. You're talking to somebody, and you got to remember your story. What was I going to say? Where was that place? What was their name? And then every so often, you check back in with the person you're speaking to, right? If in that moment, when you just check in with them, if they're... You can feel it right now, right? I'm just doing an example. You feel the second I do that, you feel that wall go up. There's a great quote. I think it was Voltaire. It was, I see you, see me. Right? It's just so true. When you check back in with them, in that moment, if they're locked eyes with you, you feel like they're engaged. It gives you the confidence to keep going and build that connection. Keep telling your story. So E is eye contact. A is avoid distraction. This is just getting harder, isn't it? I mean, it's just, I grew up, I used to pride myself on having a great attention span, but it's ruining me too. Like, for example, I have this great group of friends, kind of like a sitcom. There's like 10 or 12 of us. We used to all go out to lunch every so often. We used to go to Hibachi. Do you guys know what Hibachi is? Okay, a lot of nods here. That's good. Not everywhere. So Hibachi, just in case you don't know, is an American-Japanese, style restaurant where you all sit around a like 500 million degree grill. And then the chef comes out and cooks your food in front of you and does a show during it, which is kind of cool, but they're like flipping knives like 8 inches in front of your face, and you're like, I guess it's safe because he's got the chef's hat on. And there's a fireball, and I'm always like, my eyebrows, nothing about the eyebrows. They're taking over my face. They won. They do whatever they want. And then they make like jokes, like they'll make puns. They'll take an egg and spin it and go egg roll. And that just makes me laugh. I don't know why, because I just love language. So like, we're at Hibachi, and we're at this, and there's this one time, we're waiting for the guy to come out and do the show, and every single time, so we're waiting for him, and I'm just scrolling through my phone, right? Facebook, newsfeed, nothing new, no new updates. I get frustrated. I put it down, I look up. 12 of my friends are all scrolling, frustrated, no new updates. And finally, I realized why there's no new updates, because all the people I cared about in the world were sitting at that table. We didn't have anything to update. We knew what we were doing. So we started playing a game that a few years ago, nobody had heard of. A bunch of people have now, but just in case you haven't heard of it, it's great. If you're going out with your friends, or maybe some new colleagues or coworkers, or if you're at a conference, when you get to the restaurant, everybody stacks their phone in a pile in the middle of the table. I see some nods. First person who touches their phone pays for everybody's meals. You'll reconnect with everybody in your life when you do that. So, E, eye contact. A, avoid distraction. R stands for reflection. Reflection is a conversational tool. It means to reflect back to somebody something that they've just done or just said. In other words, they say something and then you go, so what you're saying is, and you paraphrase whatever they just said. Performers, you'll notice, you watch magicians, comedians, anything with audience interaction, we do this all the time. And the reason we do it is because when you reflect back to somebody whatever they just said, they know without a shadow of a doubt that you're engaged, because you can't do that if you're not. And you know what it sounds like when somebody's not really engaged with what you're saying, when they're not really listening to you. You finish making a point, and they'll go, huh. Or, interesting. You're like, they're not listening to a word I'm saying. You start making stuff up after that point. So R is reflection, and S is summarize. It's just doing reflection all the way at the end. When they've finished their entire argument, their 25-minute argument about why the Avengers 2 really wasn't quite as good as Avengers 1, and before you go into your rebuttal about why Avengers 2 really didn't get the credit it deserved for being as good as Avengers 1, use quick summary, one sentence, the main point of what they said. Especially important if you're debating or arguing. How often do we get to the end of an argument only to realize we've been agreeing the whole time? The problem with that is that once you intellectually realize you've been agreeing, the negative feeling of having argued stays with you, and it does affect relationships. So E is eye contact, A, avoid distraction, R, reflection, S, summarize. When you ask meaningful and relevant questions, when you listen to understand, not just to respond or to reply, and you use your ears, I think you'll find you can make better and more meaningful connections with the people in your life, personally and professionally. It drastically improved mine, on and off stage, and I really believe it can help yours as well. But the question remains, how did Ed, a blind man, see the cards? I promised you an answer, and like most great magic, the answer is very simple. When I sat across from him, underneath the table, I placed my foot gently on top of his. Then I took his hand and I gave him these instructions. I said, Ed, in a moment I'm going to place a card in your hand. I want you to let me know if you think it's a red card, and I pushed my foot down on his once. I said, then say red. If you think it's a black card, and I pushed my foot down on his twice, say black. I was teaching Ed a secret system of communication by which I could let him know the color of the cards via the foot taps. Once for red, twice for black. And then I repeated the instructions. So if you think it's a red card, say red. If you think it's a black card, say black. And then I squeezed his hand gently and I asked, do you understand? And he smiled. That big Ed smile. And he said, yes, I understand. And I knew at that moment that we had made a connection. When it was all done, I taught his wife how we did it so that they could go do it for their friends and family. And Ed was so excited to visit his grandkids that weekend to, quote, freak them out. See, for me, magic is not about the secret. It's not about a trick. For me, magic is about connecting. I think life is about connecting, and connecting is about taking on and understanding different perspectives, different points of view. Our world is a shared experience, fractured by individual perspectives. Imagine if we could all feel understood. Wouldn't that be a better world? And we can have that world. I have one final story for you. I've been fighting with this the entire time I've been here. I have one final story for you, and before I do that, I have to say thank you so much for being an incredible audience, not just for me, but all day, because I've been kind of popping in and out from the back of the room, and you are spectacular, and what a diverse amount of different types of speakers at this conference. So thank you for being here. I really do appreciate that. The last story I have for you starts 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was on a very early flight. Not unusual for me. I'm on a lot of flights. But that morning, I was exhausted. I was burnt out. I was at the airport at 4 a.m. I'd been on the road constantly for months. I just wasn't having it. And I was wearing I travel all the time. If you travel a lot, and some of you I can tell you do, if you travel a lot, you probably get into the rhythm of wearing the same clothes all the time, kind of travel clothes, like the stuff you're comfortable in on the planes. And I was wearing my Ripped Express jeans. This is what I used to wear. I was wearing my Ripped Express jeans, the one with the really expensive holes. You know, how much money can I pay for the least amount of jeans? Those jeans. I was wearing my zip-up hoodie. Pro tip, planes are getting smaller and smaller. Pullovers are hard to get on and off. You can zip-up hoodie. Also, some planes too warm, some planes too cold. Regulate your own temperature. That'll be the best thing you hear all day. Some people are writing that down. So I was wearing my zip-up hoodie, my Ripped Express jeans, and a fedora. I used to wear a fedora on stage as a magician. I stopped because I went on Tumblr once. Also, I speak sometimes at middle school conferences. So I had to stop wearing a fedora, but I used to always wear a fedora. So I get on the plane, I look at my tickets, the last seat on the plane. I don't know if you ever had the last seat on the plane. I never had before. I never will again. I get all the way to the back of the plane. It's literally right next to the bathroom. I can smell it. It's 4 a.m. I'm exhausted. I'm like sweating. And I look at my seatmate is already here. I have to pause every time I tell this story and preface this. This is not the story of how I met my wife, Lindsay. And if I don't say that, it distracts everybody. So, unpause. It's like, we pause live entertainment here. So, I'm back. I'm looking at my seatmate. She's already here. She's a well-dressed, elegant businesswoman, mid to late 30s, maybe. She's got on a black pantsuit, pixie haircut. Well done. I'm just like gross and sweaty. You ever feel like apologizing as you sit next to somebody? It's terrible. So I sit next to her, and the pilot comes on, and he's like, how you doing, folks? Now, if you travel a lot, that is a red flag because pilots don't chat unless there's something wrong. So he comes on. I hear the pilot introduce himself, and I'm like, this is not. So he tells us it's going to be a 30, 45-minute delay because someone forgot to put the wing on or whatever. And that's all I hear in that moment, isn't it? So I'm just about to put my headphones on. I'm having none of this morning. I'm about to put on my headphones, and I never do that. I never do that because I like to meet people. You get that sense from me. But I'm having none of this morning. So I'm just about to put on my earbuds, and I hear this. I like your hat. It's the lady sitting next to me. She goes, I noticed back in the terminal, I thought it'd be kind of weird to come up to a stranger, but since we're sitting next to each other, I just wanted to let you know that I like your hat. Hi, I'm Zoe. She introduced herself. Brightened my morning, shook her hand, we start chatting. Eventually, we have the conversation you always have when you're flying. I said, where are you going? She said, Minneapolis. I said, what for? She said, a conference. I said, what kind of a conference? She said, marketing. I said, oh, what do you do? She said, I'm a professor of influence and persuasion at Yale University, Dr. Zoe Chance. I was like, what? That was the coolest job title I've ever heard. Professor of Influence and Persuasion. There's no way your name is actually Dr. Chance. That has got to be something you made up. She said, yeah. She said, where are you going? I said, Minneapolis. She said, what for? I said, a conference. She said, what kind of a conference? I said, entertainment. She goes, oh, what do you do? I said, I'm a magician. She goes, get out. I was like, yeah. She goes, I love magicians. I was like, no, you don't. Nobody loves magicians. We tolerate magicians. She goes, I'm a professor of influence and persuasion. Magicians are kind of my jam. So we talk the entire flight. She brightens up my whole day. At the end of it, she says, you have to let me know when your next show is back in Connecticut. I told her where. I said, it's about 2 months from now. She said, I'll be there. Okay. So I'm never going to see this lady again, right? And 2 months later, she was right there in the audience. She came up after the show. She said, that was so much fun. I got to bring you into Yale as a guest speaker. I was like, okay. I'm never going to see this lady again. And 2 months later, I was a guest speaker for the first time at Yale University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. We became friends, colleagues of sorts. A few years later, I was invited to give a TEDx talk, and a tiny little TEDx talk. I called up my friend Zoe. I said, "Can you help me write this?" She said, "Absolutely, help me write it." A few months later, I gave it. As you heard, it became one of the most popular TEDx talks of all time, very quickly, went viral. I started getting calls from people all over the world to come speak and do magic. And one of those came from the United States Navy. They said, "Will you come overseas and do a tour for the troops and their families on military bases all over the world?" I said, "Absolutely." So all of a sudden, I was in Europe. I was in Spain and Italy. And then one day in Italy, I'm in Naples. And they said, I had a day off. And they said, "Would you like to go visit Pompeii?" Well, I'm not good at geography or history. Pompeii is the ancient city covered in ash by Mount Vesuvius. I'm in Naples. Mount Vesuvius is outside my window. I'm like, yes. So we go up to Pompeii. You pay like $2 and you get to just walk around this ancient city. And I ducked down this alleyway and it emptied out onto a massive outdoor amphitheater. And I realized I was standing on a stage, the same stage where thousands of years ago my ancestors in entertainment, performers and actors and comedians, they entertained their audiences. And it was a surreal moment in my life. A moment that only existed because 5 years ago, one stranger said to me, "I like your hat." You have no idea what kind of opportunities await you just on the other side of that next connection. Our world is truly a shared experience. Imagine if we could all feel understood. Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed that. Have an excellent conference. I really appreciate that very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.